Excellent. All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Hello today. Welcome to the Inclusive Learning Circle series, fostering synergy between UDL, AT, and AAC. Today's topic today is Universal Design for Learning and Variability. If you follow the QR code or the tiny URL link, it's going to take you to our rolling home base document where you'll find a copy of our slides today and then all the resources that we're discussing today. Give you guys a minute to get logged in here. As agents of your learning, while you guys are getting yourself set up, we really want to invite you to consider the following as you start to settle in. How can your space better support your engagement today? I know this is a virtual webinar, but maybe you want to stand while you watch this. Maybe you want to have a little walking pad you can plug in and walk slowly as you engage. Maybe you need a little snack or a fidget. Consider also what's the best way for you to perceive and understand this content. Although we are in control of that in some ways, when you have options to participate, consider what works best for you today. And then finally, what are your preferences for note-taking or sharing your questions and ideas? Maybe today you are ready to just blow up the chat and do whatever, join in our conversation and contribute lots. Great. And maybe instead you just want to sit back and soak in the information today, and that's great too. With our focus of variability today, we just want to honor everyone's variability who's here today or watching from home. And we'd also like to take a minute to introduce ourselves. My name is Emily Desjardins. I'm the UDL content lead for Open Access. With me is the wonderful Marcy from Humboldt County Office of Education. Marcy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Emily, and thank you everyone for being here. And I'm Marcy Zapeno. I'm Program Manager for Prevention and Intervention Services way up north at the Humboldt County Office of Education.
For those of you new to the Inclusive Learning Circles, we want to take a little quick moment to talk about what Open Access is. So Open Access is one of the statewide special education resource leads within the statewide system of support. We are grounded in the foundational belief that with access to quality instruction, all students can engage, actively participate, and learn within inclusive settings. What makes our project unique is that we really highlight the importance of learning and participation for all through universal design for learning, assistive technology, and augmentative and alternative communication. You can bookmark our website to easily access some free resources. We will go over that website a little bit later as well, but it is also in the home base document. You can click this slide to actually access our one-page flyer, and it kind of details our three-tiered approach to assisting LEAs and SELPAs statewide. We offer universal targeted and intensive services, and you can learn more about that on our website, or feel free to reach out to anyone on the Open Access team as well. Our contact information is all located on the home base document. Inclusive Learning Circles are new to anything from Open Access. We are a very small but mighty team, we like to say. Troy Tickle is our executive leader. Melanie Purdy is our administrative assistant. Lori Balsano Wright and Leah Padilla are the coordinators of the project. And then we have 3 content lead specialists. I'm the UDL content lead specialist. You just saw Jennifer Wright, our AAC specialist, who's working her magic in the background with chat and dropping links into the chat. So thank you very much, Jen. And then we are also actually hiring soon. So we said goodbye to our fabulous AT specialist in December. Jill McCann retired. We miss her dearly and love her. But we're also very excited for someone else to join our team. We're ready for another AT specialist. So if you know someone or yourself has an interest, background in special education, interest and knowledge in AT, this is a really fun team to join. I joined in July, and it's really great work. It's a fun team. So if you have any interest, reach out to Lori and Leah. We will be posting the position probably in March on EdJoin. So, but if you're interested, feel free to reach out and they can give you details on that. So that's our shameless plug. Join our team. And again, if you've ever been to an inclusive learning circle, you know that we have an accessibility promise. So we really commit to utilizing strategies in our presentations that really support accessibility for all. We make sure we have simple backgrounds with high contrast text. We have shortened links with our tiny URL and our QR code. We have alt text for images to support our screen reader access. And then we really do our best to provide some examples and non-examples, and then build in those opportunities for participation and feedback. We really encourage your participation today. We're always monitoring the chat. So just like before, thank you. Keep putting in those comments and let us know what's going on. We also love reactions, so make sure you use those if you'd like. You're welcome to use the Q&A feature. I would say we always check those, and we will, if you have like probably more extensive questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A. You can use the chat too, that's totally fine. But if it's too big of a question for us to answer in this webinar, we do always make sure we follow up and we put those questions and answers on the home base document, and we make sure we answer them later. So if you have big questions, feel free to drop those in and we will make sure we use those. We were gonna use a polling feature today, and then in our run through before we got started, there was like a glitch and it's not working. So we're gonna skip that. And when it comes to our poll, we'll just use the chat. But maybe we'll try the polling feature next time. We'll see how it goes. It seems to be different on a webinar than a regular Zoom. Anyway, doesn't matter, but we're skipping the poll today. As a reminder of the resources we have available, our website is linked here as well as the home base document. And the home base document, you can follow the tiny URL or the QR code, and then it again will be dropped in the chat by the wonderful Miss Jen Wright.
All right, so now we're ready to dig in with our time together today. So as you know, we begin, if you've been to previous sessions, we begin all of our sessions with an inclusive welcome. And we didn't invent this practice, but it is one of the signature practices created by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And Jennifer will drop that link in the chat, the signature practices. So this is a research-based, wonderful guide to integrating social emotional learning strategies. So if you've not checked it out before, a wonderful resource. And so today's inclusive welcome, and again, we're going to honor the variability, because that's our theme for today, of everyone here on the webinar. And so there's 9 questions for you to choose from. And we're just going to each choose one and answer that. So one that you're drawn to, that resonates with you, you can answer that question. And this style of inclusive welcome is something we would usually do in person, in pairs, or perhaps kind of in a mix and mingle. But virtually, we're going to utilize the chat, and we're going to see how this works. So one strategy to help us navigate multiple questions would be just include a hint about the question in your answer. So for example, I might say, I wish I did less laundry yesterday. So that indicates the question I was answering. Or I took care of myself today by going on a walk with my dog. So pick your question that resonates with you, and then go ahead and put those answers in the chat.
Good questions. I don't know which one to choose.
I wish I did more exercise yesterday, today. Thank you. Reading First Lie Wins, watching New White Lotus season 3. Oh, I always love new ideas and tips for shows and books. Oh, great. Let's see. I wish I laughed more today. I just started the newest Kamar on Strike mystery. Most excited this week, had a student use these amazing sentences about a winter animal story we did. Thank you. I was watching a baby born alive yesterday and smiling. Wow. My students made me smile today when they became independent on their fraction classwork. Great. Listening to Chronicles of Narnia, A Horse and His Boy. Catching up on Virgin River on Netflix. Excited for a large family get together this weekend. And I just read the best book called The Insignificant Life of a Cactus. Highly recommend. It's about a teenager with arms growing up and navigating life. That sounds really interesting. I'm excited because it's my daughter's ballet gala performance on Saturday. Awesome. Exciting. Well, thank you, everyone. And one way, if I've done this in person, is you can, if you're paired up with someone, you can ask somebody the question, And then if they can choose to answer that question, or they could choose to answer a different question. And then you take turns, just, for using that universal design for learning lens, offering choice, and know that we're all variable learners. And so there might be one question that resonates with us more than another. Let's see, one more. I wish I went to Zumba yesterday to help with stress and my health. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. So for today's session, we have our objectives that we have brainstormed and thought about for today, but we first wanted, when we're thinking about variability, and feel free to put in the chat, what are your hopes for this session? So just a minute to think about what are your hopes for this session, and anything that comes to mind. And I'll also read off the objectives, but the objectives that we have is to understand the concept of learner variability, reflecting on your own variability and applying in our settings, and then to explore the UDL 3.0 updates that highlight learner variability and delve into strategies to plan for variability. So that's what we have laid out for today. And if there's any other hopes in the session or something that resonates with you within those objectives, feel free to put it into the chat. And you can also do that as we move along through our time together today as well. All right. So moving along, I didn't know there were UDL 3.0 updates. So excited to touch on that. Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Sarah. And the updates are incredible, and we will dive into the updates that were just released this summer. So we will get to that. But for starting out today, our learning path is going to start out with exploring what learner variability is and why it's important to consider within UDL. And then we're going to move on to address the UDL updates and the new considerations that focus on variability. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to plan for learner variability when you're thinking about your own setting. And we recognize that everyone is likely in different settings, but planning for and recognizing variability can really help in all of our environments. So it is most certainly can help us have that compassion and empathy for those around us. So no matter what setting we are in, we want to plan for that variability. And great. And so my hope is for the session to understand more about variability, what that is. All right. Thank you. All right. So Nicole Tucker-Smith is the founder of LessonCast, which is an organization focused on professional development for universal design for learning. She's also a primary contributor to the development of the 3.0 guidelines. And so we're going to listen to her definition of learner variability in this short about 2 minutes and 50-second video.
Before we dive into defining the term learner variability, I have a question for you. What is your preferred way to travel? If you could choose any mode of transportation, would you travel by car, plane, train, boat, bicycle, motorcycle, or walking? Take a moment to think about what method of travel works best for you. Now, if you think about it long enough, you probably come to the conclusion that it depends. It depends on where you're going, how far is the distance, what time of year is it, who else is traveling with you. The context matters, and thus your preference will vary. The concept of learner variability recognizes the role context plays and how it impacts how learners show up in different environments. Learner variability is the dynamic and ever-changing mix of strengths and challenges that makes up each learner. Learner variability is not synonymous with learning styles. For example, I might take an assessment that says, I'm a preferred auditory learner. But that doesn't mean that I want to learn everything that way, regardless of the content, situation, or just how I might be feeling that day. Rather than design for specific learning styles as if our preferences are static, we should design multimodal learning experiences, and create spaces where learners can choose which ways work best for them in any given time and context. And learner variability isn't something to fear. As humans, sometimes our natural biases can lead us to fear what we perceive to be different. But instead of being led by fear, we can choose to listen to other perspectives and learn from others' experiences. So, as you learn more about learner variability and how recognizing it helps us to improve learning experiences for everyone, keep in mind this quote from Audre Lorde. It's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences.
Right. I love Nicole Tucker-Smith. Her videos are fantastic. If you've never checked out her YouTube channel, she has a great channel, and she is kind of slowly but surely going through all of the UDL updates and kind of releasing videos here and there. And she's got, all of her stuff is very great. It's very digestible, accessible, recommend. So on the screen, you'll see an image of brain activity that is occurring within the brain. Modern neuroscience views the brain as a complex web of integrated and overlapping networks. How many of you have ever seen those images of brains where like one side of the brain is being utilized, so it's lit up, and then the other side is not? This theory has totally been debunked, but that's most likely how all of us grew up thinking our brains worked, right? We were using one side at the time. That really has something that has totally been debunked. And we know now that variability is actually the dominant feature of our nervous system, and that all parts of our brain are working all the time. Like our fingerprints, no two brains are alike. Each brain is a complex, interconnected web that is sculpted and influenced by both genetics and also interactions within the environment. Even identical twins have totally unique brains because even though their genetics are the same, their life experiences are different, and that shapes how their brains are formed. The concept of neural variability is really important for educators because it reminds us that learners do not have an isolated learning style, but instead they rely on many parts of the brain working together to function within any given context. There's no single way a brain will perceive, engage with, or execute a task. Variability is not just an important consideration for thinking about differences between students, but also within students in different contexts. If you're interested in learning more about brain science related to this, we're going to provide some resources at the end for you to dig in a little bit later, but there's some great stuff to dig in more if you're interested. So as many of you know, and some of you are surprised about, which is great news because we can share all of this with you, the UDL guidelines were updated this summer to reveal the UDL 3.0 guidelines. These updates were really created over the course of 5 years of research and collaboration from people across the world. These updates were focused on the most modern neuroscience on how human beings learn best. It's looking at what are the strategies that can best support human beings in engaging with their learning, what are the strategies that can best support human beings in perceiving their learning, and what are the strategies that can best support human beings in showing their understanding. So CAST recognized that their UDL guidelines 2.2, which were last updated in 2018, needed some updates to reflect several things. First, advances in those learning sciences. Neuroscience, psychology, educational research, all of that. A stronger emphasis on equity, inclusion, and social justice in learning environments. The evolving role of technology and digital learning tools. And then this one really, it's my favorite, the importance of joy, play, and emotional well-being in learning. CAST engaged in a 5-year process of gathering feedback from educators, researchers, students, school and district leaders, accessibility and inclusion specialists, and they reviewed research on culturally responsive teaching, trauma-informed practices, and engagement strategies. The core structures of those 3 UDL principles really remain the same: the engagement, that why of the learning, the representation, the what of the learning, and the action and expression, the how of the learning. But the changes made in UDL 3.0 updates, they ultimately made changing the goal of UDL as well. This was a very big change. So the ultimate goal of UDL has been to create expert learners for the last 20 years. But in July 2024, this goal shifted from expert learners to creating learner agency for our students. This essential shift in the purpose of UDL is deeply rooted in the importance of learner variability. The fact that every learner brings their own unique strengths, challenges, and experiences to the table. So while the expert learner model was valuable, it unintentionally suggested a one-size-fits-all path to expertise, which doesn't fully reflect the very many ways that people learn and succeed. By focusing on learner agency instead, UDL takes a more inclusive approach, recognizing that success looks different for everyone. This shift isn't about molding students into a predetermined idea of the expert, but instead about giving them the tools, flexibility, and support to take charge of their own learning in ways that work for them. So one question I often get in regards to learner variability and then the guidelines themselves is, okay, if we all learn differently, how can there be a list of considerations that are targeted to look at how we learn best? Great question. I will absolutely answer this in just a minute. We know that all humans need to be engaged. They need to perceive the information and they need to be able to show their learning, right? But how they do it might look different. And I'll explain more as we dig a little bit into the updates. So the overall updates in the engagement principle of the UDL guidelines now highlights the importance of affirming learners' identities, fostering a sense of belonging, and promoting joy and empathy in the learning process. Choice and autonomy have always been a part of the guidelines, but the wording for those considerations was adjusted with this update. The addition of that consideration, nurturing joy and play, was very exciting. So to address that question we were just talking about, how can this be a list of how human beings learn best if we all learn differently? It's a very good question. So we know that all human beings learn best when they're experiencing joy in learning, but we don't always experience that joy in learning in the same ways. So research shows, and there's a fabulous video from Nicole Tucker-Smith explaining all of this, recommend, that shows that we experience joy in 5 different ways: through exploration and play, through connection to our identity, through collaboration with peers, through play, and then through having opportunities to shine as experts. So the way I connect through my identity is going to be very, very different than somebody else, right? That's my unique personal way of connecting my identity to material. And there might be some material I connect with that you don't. But we know that human beings feel connected to their learning, or that when they do feel connected, they do experience joy. I actually got to see this in action the other day in a 7th grade classroom, and it was so exciting. There's a teacher that starts her day regularly with a picture on the board, and she asks everyone to identify what they see in the picture and then what they can infer because of that picture. She's focusing on making connections in literature, but uses this picture as a way for her students to practice this skill. Like, what do I know? And then what can I assume based on this picture? Or what do I predict based on this picture? That particular day's picture went up, and one child in the back squealed with utter delight. Oh my gosh, I know where this is. I know it. Oh my gosh, I know what that mountain is. I know what this is. So excited. And he's whispering, not really whispering, to his group in just a very excited, loud way. The picture turned out to be taken in Afghanistan, where his relatives live, and he had visited a few years ago. So he did, in fact, know that mountain. He knew the name of the mountain range in the background of the picture. He was fully engaged and interested in this activity because he felt so truly connected to this picture. And I think sometimes when we think about this consideration, nurture, joy, and play, we maybe are thinking about children running around in circles and somehow learning through physical activity or playing a board game or something like that. But this joy really can just come from connecting, from truly meaningful life connections the character, the material, the picture, whatever. This was something that was important to his life, and thus he saw it represented and was like, ah, connection. So that's my exciting connection to joy. The representation principle places greater focus on authentically representing diverse identities and perspectives, challenging bias in information presentation, and valuing multiple ways of knowing and interpreting knowledge, which all connect to building that respect and understanding to learner variability. And then finally, the action and expression principle calls for honoring diverse forms of communication and expression, especially those historically marginalized, to create more inclusive and accessible learning environments, which again really connects to that importance of acknowledging learner variability. The focus on addressing biases is a huge addition to UDL 3.0. It's integrated throughout all three principles, and it kind of looks at addressing biases in instructional materials, in assessments, and classroom practices. And the goal of this edition is really to help create learning environments where all students, regardless of language, culture, ability, or background, feel valued and supported. So this new set of guidelines really emphasizes a diverse perspectives, multiple means of knowing, and authentic representation, ensuring that learning is not just accessible, but it's also meaningful and powerful for every student.
All right. So just before I move on to this, we have another little, just a tech. But I think when you stop sharing your screen, Emily, then it paused the recording. So
Actually, I think it's,
You know what?
Marcy,
It says it
does say recording.
It's
oh,
on my
good.
thing.
Okay, because we
we're
were
good.
checking. Okay, we're good. Okay, just
we're
want to
good.
make sure, double check, check,
Okay, good check, good check.
that we're still recording our webinar so we can post it. All right, so let's reflect, pause for a minute. And so this slide says, what happens to learners when there is only one way for them to engage, receive, or demonstrate learning? So one example of this, when you think about that, imagine in a classroom, like if all students were working at their desks, they're sitting, reading a printed article, and their task is to highlight the main idea and supporting details of the article. So here's one way of engaging, could be they're all sitting quietly, right? One way of perceiving is they're reading a printed article, and one way of showing what they know is they're highlighting that main idea and supporting details of a text. So given that example, think about your own environment. Maybe you teach adult professional development, maybe you're in the classroom, you could be elementary, middle, high school, maybe preschool, maybe you're an instructional leader. Whatever your environment is, what might happen to learners in this scenario in your environment? Just a moment to think about that, and you can put it into the chat. And again, just thinking about it in the sense that there's just one way of engaging. They're all expected to sit quietly. There's one way to perceive the information. They're all reading a printed article. And then there's just one way of showing what they know is they're highlighting the main idea and supporting details. So when we're thinking about variability and the variability of our learners, what could be some barriers to that, right? What could happen to learners in this scenario?
I feel like you'd see some significant behaviors. See some students just shutting down.
Yep, especially if that's an area that's challenging for them. Yep, some of the learners, may shut down, become discouraged or bored. The learners can get bored and start doing other things. Yep, absolutely. If the student cannot engage in the expected response mode, then they cannot demonstrate their knowledge. Their skills may be underestimated. Absolutely. All right, thank you, Rebecca. And everybody else for putting in the chat. I'll make sure I'm getting everyone. All right. So we're going to look at this jagged profile, and this is debunking the myth of average. So if you've heard of Todd Rose's books, it's The Myth of Average, and he discusses this idea of a jagged profile. And when we're comparing two human beings, we can see a vast variety in individuals when comparing multiple dimensions, so such as physical body parts. So in Todd Rose's book, he talks about creating cockpits for pilots and the search for the average size pilot to create a cockpit that could allow everyone to access the controls and sit comfortably. But when he calculated the average size pilot, they determined that because so many variables were being measured, the average pilot measurement actually fit 0 of the 400 pilots as they measured, because each of these parts of a whole just cannot be averages. So Todd writes about how the solution became adjustable seats in airplanes, and it's also the reason we now have adjustable seats in cars. We have links in the home-based document to Todd Rose's book, as well as a 6-minute video. If you haven't checked out Shelley Moore, she has these great 5-minute videos, and it really breaks down the thesis of the book and summarizes it really nicely. So when we look at this picture, we can use a jagged profile to think about our own learning. So this jagged profile in the middle says my interests, my persistence, my understanding of terminology, my ability to take the task done, to get the task done, and my ability to communicate. So as you can imagine, when we're looking at 2 different learners in a given situation, these jagged profiles are going to be exactly that. They're going to be completely jagged, right? So we can use a jagged profile to think about ourselves in different situations. So as you might imagine, in different situations, our interests are going to look different. Our persistence is going to be different. Our knowledge or our ability, it's going to vary depending on what the task is. And then the same goes for our students in different subjects, right? It also depends on times of day. Some people are more morning people. Some people are more, nighttime, evening people. So their variability is something we can plan for and predict. So even though there's so much variability, that is something that we're able to, once we get to know our students, we need to be thinking about that and planning for that variability. So I'm going to give you an example. I did this. I kind of plotted my jagged profile, and I thought about 2 different tasks that were very different in terms of how I perceived my interest in them. So it was planning a vacation and doing my taxes, right? So I noticed many ways that I was variable in these 2 tasks. So our profiles are jagged and can depend on the task, but also other variables. So again, like the time of day, or what happened to me the day before. Did I get enough sleep? Right? Typically, I work much better. For me, I work much better in the morning than in the afternoon. But again, that can change depending on the day. And I can also focus more when I understand the purpose of the task assigned to me in general. But if I have a task that's highly motivating, I might not need as much background knowledge and information. I can also have a really difficult time focusing on a task if I had an upsetting event happen the day before. These all are going to impact my performance. So when we think about our own variability and answer one of these questions, like for example, how do you learn something new? Has that changed over time as you learn new strategies or skills? And then what doesn't work for you? And then also be considering like how might your profile change given the context? For example, if I have dishes in the sink, if I have dishes in the sink in the evening, I'm actually quick to get them done because I don't want that sitting out. I don't want to wake up to that in the morning to have that task to do. So I'm pretty motivated to get that all cleaned the night before I go to sleep. But context matters, right? So if I'm, again, because if I'm too tired, that could change. So context matters for all humans, and it's not just for our students. So we all follow this. We're all variable learners, and depending on what our interest in the task is, it's going to change. It could change, daily. It could change by the hour. So just a few more thoughts about learner variability. And then there's 2 things we know for sure, right? So learner variability is systematic and to a large degree predictable, right? So there's never been a class. So you're not going to have all your students come to class and they're all performing at the same academic, behavioral, developmental, social, emotional levels across all students. That just never happens. And it shouldn't happen, right? Because we're all variable learners. We can predict that there is going to be that very learner profile across all our students in our classrooms, and we can plan for that. And then we can predict that some students might want time to read and digest material, right? Some students might want a visual representation of concepts, and some students might need to actually do something in order to understand it. Some students may need the audio version of it, right? Different varied ways of they take in that information and having that options for them to take in their learning. And additionally, learner capacities are context dependent. So meaning we are good at some things and not good at other things. We may be better in the morning, while others may learn best, in the evening. So a few thoughts about this with learner variability. We're going to move on to activity focused on thinking about your own variability. And we're going to focus on 3 specific activities. And this is one where we had a poll, but we're just going to do this in the chat. And we'll reveal that in a minute, what the tasks are. But what you want to be starting to think about what your knowledge is and what your interest is. So we know that for our learners to be engaged, they need to have some sort of connection, right? Or interest. And they need to have some background knowledge in order to help them get started on the activity. So sometimes we have like a lot of interest in something, but we don't have that knowledge yet. And sometimes we have the knowledge, but we don't have much interest in it. So as we go through each of these scenarios, you have the choice to focus on your knowledge, or you could think about what interests you have in it. Okay, so when we look at our first scenario, so when you think about the first scenario is planting a garden with vegetables that actually grow. So think about your interests or your knowledge and what category you fall in. So perhaps you have 0 interest, like a little, or you're a little bit curious, interested, but just have never tried it. Maybe you're interested, enjoy it, and are still learning, or perhaps this is your favorite hobby. Maybe you have knowledge maybe you have no knowledge at all of it. Perhaps a bit of knowledge and can complete this with some assistance. Perhaps you're knowledgeable about this and can do some parts, but not quite all the steps. And maybe you can do it all when it comes to gardening. So I want you to acknowledge that there's 4 options, right? And it might be pretty limiting for you, given the vast variability of the group in the background, and that's okay. The point is just to show the variety of our group here, even with limited options. So, and I'm going to give you a choice as well. So you could think about, just pick one, and you can think of just what your interest is, or you could also think about what the skill level you are, or you could do both. And to show too that your interest could really vary from your skill. So for example, I might be interested and enjoy this, but I'm also still learning it. So maybe I'm a straight stage 3 in interest, but I cannot keep a flower alive, right? So I don't have much knowledge to perform that task. So maybe I'm kind of in between a 1 or a 2. So thinking about what your interest is, and Emily, thanks for the example. So you could put both in the chat, or if you want to just comment on one, your knowledge or your skill. So think about this in planting a vegetable garden, and go ahead and invite you to put in the chat what your interest is and what your skill level is, so we can look at our variety of learners that we have here with us today. Okay, so I see an interest and skill, stage 2. Yep, a 1 and a 2. Great, stage 3, interest and skill. Yep, stage 3. A 2 and a 2 for interest and skill. Interest 4, knowledge 3, and always learning more. Awesome.
We got a 4 up there too. Planting a vegetable flower garden, stage 4.
Nice. Yep, stage 3. I love this because it really just shows that variability, right? Of our learning styles, what our interests are, what our skill levels are. Okay, we're going to go to another scenario, and keep them coming in. Thank you. I see another stage 3. So in the next scenario is to play a musical instrument. So consider whether you want to answer based on interest or knowledge. Again, it looks like we're both doing both in what we did before. So you could be thinking about your interest and your knowledge, and then consider where you are on this spectrum. All right, so I'll just give it a moment to put in the chat. Knowledge 1 and interest 2.
You know, there was one above that was interesting to me. It was interest 1, skill 2. I feel like it's rare that we see a higher interest than, or a lower interest than a skill. And to me, my guess is that maybe it was like a childhood skill that you were like, I am not a fan of this, but I had to learn it. That's just my guess. Please tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm curious.
Nice. Yeah, a 1 and 2s. I see a 2 and a 3. Interest 3, knowledge 1. Yeah, I'm with you on the interest 3, knowledge 1. I was just telling Emily earlier that I would love to learn to play the piano. I'm interested in it, but my knowledge to be able to perform the task, not there. Maybe, I don't know, maybe when I retire, I could take that skill on. Interest 2, knowledge, yeah. Knowledge, interest, stage 2, knowledge, interest 3.
Oh, we've got a question.
You want to read it? Because I don't have it in front of me.
You know what? It disappeared. Someone raised their hand, but then it disappeared. I'm happy to allow that person to talk if they raise their hand again. Maybe it was a bump on accident. Okay. But if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'm happy to let you speak.
Okay, so we're going to do one more. And this is to speak, so speaking 2 languages. Right, and English can count as one of them. And so same idea. Consider your interests or knowledge, and then consider where you are on the skill level. So we'll drop it into the chat for our last one here on speaking 2 languages. Stage 2 skills, stage 3 interest. Yep, I think I'm with you on that one. Interest 4 and 4, nice. 3 both. Yeah, Duolingo. Yep. 1 and 4, 4 and 3, 2 and 4. Knowledge 2 and interest 3. Knowledge 3, interest 4. Nice. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and keep putting in the chat if you want to keep adding your comments there, and we'll keep moving along.
If you watched our last UDL Inclusive Learning Circle, which was, I want to say in November, you have definitely heard us talk about Ludia. If you were not there, I'm just going to give you a brief little way that you can use Ludia to help create some tools and supports for your learners to help meet their learner variability needs. So for those of you who have not heard of Ludia, it is an AI-powered UDL chatbot that can do so many fabulous things. I have become very, very interested in it. I've spent a lot of time diving deep into it, and we are actually now collaborating with the founders of Ludia. It was founded by 2 classroom teachers who really just were looking for a way to make planning UDL easier. Like the biggest goal was to create efficiency in how we plan UDL lessons. And so this is a completely free resource. They never ever want it to be something that anyone pays any amount of money for. So it is very much set to be free. We are now hosting Ludia on our site, our website, which we're very, very excited about. And I'm going to take you to that in just a minute. I also am going to do a little plug for a webinar we have coming up with Ludia as well. During that webinar, we're going to Beth Stark and Jeremy Rostan are the 2 founders of Ludia, and they are going to kind of talk a little bit about the background of how Ludia works or ways that they use Ludia, some resources they've created to help you with your Ludia journey. And then a 7th grade teacher is going to come talk a little bit about how she used Ludia to create inclusive learning circles. This is inclusive learning circles, not inclusive learning circles, literature circles. That's what I was going to say. Literature circled with her 7th graders, and she did it in the form of creating a book club. So she just started from scratch, and Ludia helped her do so many things with this book club, and it's very cool. Students got to choose their own book. Her goal was really to create that connection to identity for her students through the main character. So she wanted them to be able to choose it. Anyway, she'll talk through all of that. I will plug the webinar at the very end, but I'll show you a little bit about this first. Okay. On our website, there's a link on the home base, and then Jen, would you mind dropping it in the chat as well? If you go to our Universal Design for Learning tab and our Open Access UDL resource page, it will take you to Ludia at the top right here. And if you open this, you'll see it's a bit of a chat bot. For some reason, my screen is seems to be a little bit smaller than it usually is, but that's okay. I want to show you a couple of things that I created through Ludia, and I'm happy to share them as well in the chat. But I use them to create, my goal was to create ideas for creating English language arts centers using UDL strategies, right? So I created this little guide with things to consider when planning, a center planning worksheet, center ideas for students, a lesson plan for teachers to teach expectations for their students around what does center time look like, a student checklist for during centers, and then finally translated that into Spanish. So every single one of these things was created because I put a prompt in and asked Ludia for support. So when I say it can do a lot, it really, really can. These documents were all things that were specifically requested from school districts or schools that were asking for or teachers that were asking for my coaching. And so we used Ludia together to create this. So I'm just sharing these. They might seem slightly random, but they're based on specific needs. So this particular one is strategies to support English language learners. And so we used specific considerations to connect to some strategies, but there's some ways to really dig into that language development. Ludia helped create templates, lesson examples, word maps. There's goal setting forms. This is great. Some ways to optimize challenge and support for English language learners. You know, this is one consideration that's very near and dear to my heart because I feel like very often we seem to have classrooms that either over challenge or over support, but finding that balance is so hard because we have to presume competence. We want students to be challenged and engaged, and yet we also want to support them. So, you know, finding that balance is tricky. Ways to optimize relevance, value, and authenticity, goal progressing forms. Oh, bilingual tech tools. This is very exciting. Actually, this one Ludia did not make. We added that to this. Fostering belonging in community. Then this is an interactive reading circle checklist for students. And then like I put this in, or it created this, and I said, can you make a version for younger students? And it just made it more accessible for first graders or second graders or someone younger. Sentence frames to support student collaboration. You know, these kinds of resources, anything that you can imagine. Okay, I have an upcoming lesson and what is the thing that I can plan for that learner variability? Like I know some students are going to need sentence frames. I know some students are going to need, you know, sentence starters to start their collaboration with their peers. I know some students are going to need visuals, whatever it is. There's so many great resources from Ludia. In the home base, I also have, I might not put it on the home base. So also in the Ludia, oh, then it's on the website. Here it is. This checklist right here. If you open this right here, I tried to just come up with some ways to kind of pick your brain and start thinking of ways that you can ask Ludia questions, because the way you ask questions definitely matters. The more specific, the better. If Ludia answers in a way you don't like, definitely tell it. Definitely say, that's not what I was thinking, and try again. Try rephrasing it, rewording it. Ludia will absolutely make choice boards, will make rubrics, all kinds of fun things. But I will say, occasionally I'll say, can you please make a rubric? And it will, for some reason, spew out an explanation of a rubric or explanation of the guidelines. And I'll have to say, please make me an actual rubric, an actual, checklist, checkpoint rubric, and then it will actually do it. But for some reason, sometimes that's not the first answer, but I promise it will do it. Last but not least, there is a video here linked that gives about a 3-minute description of just tips, tricks. I think it's probably similar to what I said just now, but in case you want to look into it, you're welcome to. And the real last thing that I was going to say is it doesn't copy and paste tables. So like if it does make a choice board for you, and I will say too, you can have it do a choice board with description for students, with examples of what in a rubric, you could do like examples of what a student could write, or in a choice board, what would this project look like actual student examples, which is awesome. But it creates all of that. When you copy and paste it into a Google Doc, it will not take the table with you. So I just open a Google Doc, create the table size I want, and copy and paste line by line. It takes an extra 5 minutes, but I promise it's done all the work for you. So it's very much worth it. So highly recommend checking this tool out. Some other resources that we have here as well. We've given you a lot of information about learner variability today. And so there's not really time for exploration before the end of this, but hopefully you'll have some time on your own to dig in. We have something to read, something to watch, and something to explore. If you are interested in reading, we have an article called UDL in the Learning Brain, and it goes a little bit more into that variability and brain science. You can click for the digital version, and it's also in the home base. There's some videos for you to watch as well. This video linked here is about learner variability, and it's from CAST, the actual creators of the UDL guidelines. And then if you're interested in exploring, there is a link to the Digital Promise, which is the Variability Navigator. The Variability Navigator project is a free and open source tool with professional learning resources that can be customized for educators. Highly recommend checking that out. Videos in it. Sorry about that. We only have a few minutes for question and answers, but we would love to hear any questions, anything. What are your questions? We'll start our intentional close at the same time. And then if you have questions or your intentional close, they can both go in the chat at the same time. But we want to end today by thinking about sort of what is one word that sums up how understanding learner variability can support our students. What does it do? We're going to watch this last video and be thinking about that question as you watch, and then feel free to also write in the chat any questions you have and your one-word intentional close.
Dear teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I really do want to listen and learn.
It's just my brain is kind of different. So this is what I'd like you to know about me. I have to move, or I really can't pay attention.
Even though I'm not looking at you, I can still listen to what you're saying.
If you tell me, sit up straight, now I have to use all of my brain to do just that.
It makes me feel sad when you tell me to try harder, even though I've already tried as hard as I can.
I actually listen better when I'm rocking in my chair. When you give me a bunch of directions, I start to think I will never remember all of this. Sometimes my mom or dad ends up doing all of my homework. So here's how you could maybe help. Let me get up and move while I'm learning.
Let me look wherever I want when you talk to me.
Let me rock or slouch in my chair.
No matter what, please don't take away my recess. Give me a hug I could do all by myself. Make directions very short.
Just ask me, what does your brain need right now?
And one more thing. My brain might be different than yours, but it's still amazing.
Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student. Your student.
I love that video so much. Such a good one. So important. Love that. Ooh, connection. I love that one. That's a great word too. Thank you so much. Feel free. Anybody else has any more word, any more addition to that one word that sums up how understanding learner variability can support our students. And then my shameless plug for our Ludia webinar. You can click to register here in the slide deck, or it is also linked in the home base document underneath the survey section. So there's a spot to do that as well. Our upcoming inclusive learning circles for March and April are integrating and implementing assistive technology, and then AAC in high school and transition. There's additional details on the flyer. And if you want, you can save this link here. We'll go to all the other dates coming up as well. We would love for you to take a couple minutes to fill out our feedback survey. We so very much appreciate your patience with all of our tech issues today. And we also really, really appreciate you all being here on this lovely Wednesday. Sorry, I moved back. Oh, and also shameless plug to please follow us on social media. I'll stay on this one so you guys can see that. Any questions at all, feel free to ask in the chat. We'll stay for a couple more minutes to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, everyone.